Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today we're finally back to discuss the finale of What If Shane Killed Rick. Like I said, this is the finale, so if you haven't already checked out the first 9 parts, be sure to do so using the link in the description and comments section. And if you have been a longtime fan of this series and you enjoy it, be sure to watch this video all the way through to the end, because since it's the end of the series, I did decide to throw in some bonus things at the end and explain a lot of things, just because I know you guys are really loyal to the series and you really like it, so I decided I'd add that in there for you. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into What If Shane Killed Rick. Following Carl and the others return from their successful mission at Meridian, Alexandria is approached by Lance Hornsby of the Commonwealth to join their community. Carl and the rest of the council agree to this, but Maggie refuses, retreating to Hilltop. Not much would really change for the Commonwealth, to be honest, except that Judith and RJ aren't there, which makes joining the community a more of a moving on situation for Daryl and Carl. Aaron is essentially replaced with Carl 1-to-1, as he's got a similar temperament and we've built up his bond and dynamic with Gabriel before this point. The one issue with that is that Aaron was given more of an opportunity with scouring after they found out about his prior occupations. But they did already seem interested in Aaron before that, and they being the Commonwealth, of course. Also, with Carl being the leader of Alexandria and being very cooperative thus far, I think they'd be fine with him. Plus, it would help to get Gabriel in. Now, Lydia's death actually makes a pretty solid impact. The place Toby Carlson raided was only found out by Maggie after Lydia convinced her to follow the lead they were given. No one else had a strong voice on this issue, so without her, no one would have investigated. By the way, we're just going to go ahead and get Shane reintroduced into the story, as he has joined Riverbend and married Annie. Very similar to what Negan did whenever he was gone during the time skip. He's the one who sent the message to Maggie this time, which was essentially rejected. He and Annie then go into the apartment complex and save Gabriel before Shane charges Toby to ensure Carl's survival. This is before Toby realizes the gun is empty, so all Shane sees is Carl about to get shot, and he jumps into action. After hitting him with his crowbar, Shane gets shot at by the other soldiers who started closing in. He and Carl run away, but Carl is hit by a bullet as they escape. Toby gets up with a big gash in his face from the attack, ordering all of his soldiers to hunt their enemies down. With Shane and Carl now on the run, their only option is to head to Hilltop, as it's the closest spot they can request help from. They are heavily outmanned and outgunned here. However, without Maggie investigating herself, it would be a really long time before they arrive at Hilltop and then make it back in time to help. Due to their lower weaponry and person count, they wouldn't be able to distract Toby from finding their hideout spot, meaning all of the unnamed members would be gunned down by him and his men. Gabriel and Annie are able to escape the complex this time, as that is now their only option. Meanwhile, Shane and Carl are chased down by the Commonwealth soldiers, knowing that their demise is coming pretty soon. But luckily, Toby Carlson pulls the dudes chasing them in order to flank the recent escapees. It's better to get some of them, especially those who have seen more, than to try and hunt everyone and split their forces. This allows Shane to then take the injured Carl back to Hilltop safely and inform Maggie of what's going on. Carl is taken to rest, while Maggie gets Elijah going with Shane in their car to check out the scene. Just as Gabriel and Annie are caught by Carlson and his team, Maggie rams into his goons with her car before Shane starts gunning down the others, and Elijah engages in close combat with his blades. They get Carlson as the last one left, trying to crawl away, but Shane shoots him after making sure Annie is alright. After losing all their people and their base being a target of the Commonwealth, Shane and Annie have nowhere to go. They regroup with Carl, and both he and Gabriel try to cover up the story to Lance. But it's a bit more believable since Carl was shot and all of the people in Riverbend are visibly dead. So Lance can have his suspicions, but what kind of story would he really have? Carl and Gabriel helped kill everyone on both sides? Why? Lance speculates that there might be more of this group out there, so he has his soldiers check and inform other communities to let them know. Because Herschel wasn't at Riverbend, he wouldn't have lost his hat. This means Lance probably wouldn't talk to him as much, and the big scene they caused would never happen. It's possible Maggie doesn't trust Shane with Herschel since he never saved him like Negan did. But what Shane did to her father is further removed from what Negan did, and the two had way more time working together. Plus, Shane has shown his loyalty from time to time by saving Carl. Daryl, Gabriel, and Carl are forced to fight the Commonwealth soldiers they've been assigned with. Lance hires Leah to kill Maggie and wipe out Hilltop. Since Maggie is responsible for Leah's family being wiped out still, she'd still have a vendetta against her. Again, since Lydia isn't here, I don't see Elijah going against Maggie. This means he would retreat after being told to do so by her. So Maggie would have to deal with all of the soldiers left as well as Leah alone. But it wouldn't make much difference, as I'm sure Leah would abandon her squad to hunt Maggie alone and capture her. After Elijah returns to the hideout, he informs Shane of Leah's attack and heads out to save Maggie and confront Leah. Maggie has a better defense against Leah, as she didn't kill her people out of rage, they just genuinely had to fight them to the end. Luckily for her though, Shane makes it to their location, killing Leah before Daryl shows up shortly after. The three escape Lance's attacks and reunite with the rest of the group. Shane joins the Commonwealth as a person unrelated to the conflict and blends in. Inside, he finds Mika and Megan, and the two are excited to see him. He tries to hold them off from looking too suspicious though, asking where Carol is. They meet up and Shane explains the situation before the two go looking through files to find blueprints. Jerry wouldn't be defending the kids since sadly Judith and Gracie are both dead and RJ was never born. Just like in the last part, the Negan scenes work pretty much perfectly for Shane. A key example is when he and Carol find Sebastian hiding out. After Lance is caught, walkers attack the crowd at the Commonwealth, killing Sebastian. Because of this, Eugene is hunted down along with Max. By this time, Carl, Jerry, and Elijah have left to warn Oceanside of what's going on. However, Jerry gets injured and they're forced to stop at a place Jerry calls Kingdom 2.0. They eventually get swarmed by walkers, but everything goes fine since they cut away from this pretty quickly and everyone's alright. The next episode also goes exactly the same with Lance being killed by Carol. Shane, Annie, Ezekiel, and most of the others are captured and sent to the working camps. Ezekiel wouldn't despise Shane nearly as much as Negan, since his bad actions were long before the original group had met him. However, he would also still be reeling from Michonne's death since they were a little bit closer in this timeline. It's also interesting that Dante might be there since he was locked up in Alexandria where one of the camps is. So he'd have to work with the others, slightly redeeming himself in the process, but besides some minor dialogue and role swaps, nothing will really be changed in the last few episodes. Shane makes a final attempt to sacrifice himself, but it backfires before Daryl and the others come in to save them. And then they all take on Pamela and her army at the end. Lydia is already dead, so she doesn't lose her arm, and the finale goes mostly the same. The one key change is that Judith is dead too, so she can't be shot. But instead, it would probably be Mika who takes the shot for Maggie. Shane, Megan, and Maggie would freak out about this as they all rush out of the battle scene. Shane carries Mika, fleeing from the swarm of the undead. He gives his blood to Mika at the hospital, assuming he has the right type. If not, Daryl's blood works with all types, so we would just do the canon version instead. But it would be really sick for a full circle thing for Shane to do for Mika what Rick did for Carl in season 2. I'll say it's Shane because of that, and so that we don't have to keep both him and Daryl at the hospital when Negan is supposed to be with Maggie. I mean, if both of them might be doing the same thing, I kinda can't let either of them leave. So we'll just say it's Shane. So since Shane is at the hospital here, we'll say Daryl is with Maggie. Another cool moment would be Shane dragging Mika around the hospital, very reminiscent of that flashback at the start of the outbreak with Rick. In fact, I could see sort of like a flashback recreation of that, like how they do in season 9 when Shane and Rick have their recreation of their first scene together. Or at least besides the one where Rick gets shot. Daryl tries to convince Maggie not to hunt down Pamela the way that she is, saying that it won't be good for her. Now that Carl has returned to the group, he says the same thing. Other than these changes, I feel that everything else will remain the same for the ending of the show. With Carl and Daryl there, I think Pamela would still live, but be in prison. I don't think Maggie would forgive Shane, but she doesn't want to dislike him. It's pretty much the exact same as with Negan. Shane has his family now, and Mika has become kind of like hers, so she can't force him out. Now, despite Michonne and Rick being dead at this point, I do still see Daryl leaving. The way it's framed is that Daryl obviously wanted to find Rick, but Maggie was heavily suggesting that they need to see what else is out there in the world. I mean, they went so long without knowing about this huge community of the Commonwealth, 50,000 people. She even talks to Daryl himself about this, suggesting that there's a connection there. And with Judith, Michonne, Lydia, and Aaron all sadly dead, Daryl doesn't have many people he's super close to left. This would likely make it even less of an issue for him to leave, even without the added incentive of maybe finding Rick. This means the events of Daryl Dixon would go almost identically with the exception of Carol telling Daryl someone came back. So I guess that would just never happen. As for the ones who live, I guess literally everything changes since Rick and Michonne are not there and they are the characters. The CRM would continue their reign over the people and further their plan to wipe out all other communities, even those allied to them. Jadis would remain silent about Virginia and its many groups, but still visit Gabriel every year. Now last is Dead City, which is a bit tricky to take on with Negan being absent. Firstly, would Shane kill those guys for messing with Annie? Absolutely. Would Shane send his wife and son away to save them? Absolutely. Would he form a bond with Ginny? Well, given his similar relationships with Carl, Mika, and Megan, yeah, absolutely. So he'd be on the run from the marshals of New Babylon, but this is where things get a little bit wonky. Herschel was stolen by the Croat, who did it as a means of trading for Negan due to their history. He would obviously not have any interest in Shane because he doesn't know who he is. Because of this, the Croat would either A, not engage Maggie's new group, or B, go the savior route of extorting resources from them, which was hinted to us. In that kind of position of power, I don't see the Croat not taking advantage of it, but Maggie would likely just flee with her people. Hunting down Shane of all people and saying, let's go to New York and kick this guy's butt alone would just be really stupid, whereas with Negan it made sense. It's kind of like how people were critiquing the show for being like, why does Maggie team up with Negan after what he did? That would pretty much just be this, but with Shane, except actually happening and not like the original show where it actually made sense. They likely just go back to the Commonwealth where they have thousands of people to defend with if the Barazzi or the Marshals decided to hunt them down that badly. It is kind of underwhelming to see not much change near the end of the story. and what does change is mostly just a character isn't here, so this plotline or story never happens. With Daryl and Dead City going on their second seasons, it's possible we have more to talk about in the future. But for now, this is pretty much the end of What If Shane Killed Rick. Sadly, we have multiple cliffhangers like will the Doma or the Marshals engage our main group? Will Shane ever reunite with Annie and his son? Will the CRM eventually find and wipe out our group? But I don't think any of these questions will ever be answered, sadly. Even if I cover what happens in the next few seasons of this franchise, how will I ever know whether the CRM would find out about the Commonwealth? In the canon universe, the CRM is entirely destroyed, so my only assumption is that left unchecked, they would eventually find our group and, well, you know. But then again, Rick and Michonne wiped out the entire army alone in a day, so maybe our group has hope. As for Dead City and its shenanigans, the story takes place in New York and it seems like season 2 will do the same. So unless Maggie gets back to our main group at some point or Daryl finds out about what's going on, I doubt any of those groups are going to find ours. And same for Daryl, but just in France. But anyway, I do actually want to talk about the series and some of the scrapped ideas I had for you loyal fans of the series. As you guys probably know, I pride myself in delivering the most realistic telling of events in these stories. It's what you guys are asking for when you ask, what if this happened? You want to know what would have happened. Because of that, there were a few opportunities that, had I actually been writing the show itself, I probably would have done more with. So let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. All the way back in part 1, I mentioned that Shane is staying with the group is one of the biggest thoughts most people have in these types of what ifs, but realistically that just wasn't in the cards. His plan just wasn't as good as he was hoping. And perhaps eventually I'll make some type of story where Shane wins and stays with them, as I think the story would have gone a bit differently there. But at the same time, I'm very grateful I didn't go that route, because it led to some pretty awesome stuff for Shane to do on his own. His connection to the governor in Woodbury, kidnapping Daryl, killing Herschel and Andrea, and even the governor himself felt super strong. His relationship with Andrea was a perfect continuation from season 2 and actually made it feel like it meant something, whereas in season 2 it was just kind of random. And the end of the governor arc felt like a great close as well. All of our major characters from seasons 1 and 2, with a few from 3, came together in an ultimate clash. This eventually led to Shane building a new family with Tara, Bob, Megan, and Mika. And I loved writing how his group basically went through the events of season 4 because our group was way ahead of them. The hospital story felt like it was a perfect fit for Shane, and the Reapers were a great follow-through on his past stories and how Shane can't control everything. It was also a great way to get him back involved with our main group through Maggie essentially replacing Negan since he died, as you guys saw. But with our handful of assorted characters now dead or alive, it was very interesting to see them interact and collide. My main gripe, which is also with the main show, is with season 11. I love the Reaper arc for this what if, but it felt like some things weren't properly followed up on due to the nature of the Commonwealth story. For one, most of our main characters were either still alive, like Daryl and Rosita, easily replaced by a character we have now, like Aaron and Negan with Carl and Shane, or sadly unimportant like Judith and Lydia. Because of that, it didn't really seem like there were any major alterations after the Reaper arc. The final arc of the show is so mind-numbingly segmented, so I really couldn't do much for any of the extra characters or missing ones. I wanted Dante, Megan, and Mika to all be important in season 11, and I wrote them beforehand as if they would be. But when reviewing the Commonwealth arc again, it just wasn't in the cards. For Dante, I'm glad I could at least get him in on the last few episodes, but I didn't really say much specifically because I have no idea what he would really do or how anyone would truly react to him. Is he now reformed after having like almost no screen time, so all of that happens off screen? Or is he still struggling, in which case do we really cram that character arc into these last few episodes while everybody else is already doing the exact same things? It's just really hard. There isn't enough wiggle room in this overly packed story, which is how I feel with the original season 11. As for Mika, I wanted her to have more to do after being so important in the last arc, but the only way to do that would be for her to not be at the Commonwealth. But taking Megan there only to leave her with a group she doesn't know would be terrible. The best place for Megan is the Commonwealth, as she needs to be reinstated to a society that isn't treating her the way the Reapers did, and Hilltop just isn't safe. So she couldn't be anywhere but there, and thus the same is for Mika. I did think about having Mika at Hilltop due to her connection with Maggie, and she would just essentially replace Lydia. But the issue there is that I built up Carl and Mika's romance, so Elijah would either not build as much connection, or we would scrap that entirely for him instead. But like I said, Mika would have to be with Megan, so even that idea wouldn't have worked. And lastly is Megan herself, who likely would have been taken in by Magna and her group as one of them, as I could totally see their connection. Megan wanting the Commonwealth's corruption to be exposed would work after living with the Reapers. But sadly, she doesn't have any connection to our more core cast, so there just isn't really much for her to do. As for the rest of this franchise, I already spoke at length about the sad future this leaves this What If in. But yeah guys, that's the end of What If Shane Killed Rick, unless Dead City and Daryl Dixon Season 2 completely change things, or like in a couple years we get more Walking Dead content that completely changes things. That's pretty much gonna be the end. I hope you guys have enjoyed this wild ride. I know it was long, both in length and also how long it took us to actually finish the series, but we worked really hard to try and get it to the end for you guys. As always, a huge shout out to our channel members, LA to Plug 2, Paul Keen, Hazy Brush, Marco De Cinco, Davisville 84, Willie, Very Classy Demon, 23 Days Later, Aiden Kearns, Zombie Warlord, Yeah, Tifu A, Joel, and Chief Constituent. If you want to have your name read out at the end of the video and also get awesome perks like exclusive community posts, priority comment replies, and early videos, then make sure to become a channel member for just $2.99 a month. It really helps support the channel, and we appreciate it a lot. But as always, tell me if you like this series, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.